Ready to dive into Proverbs chapter 25? Let's explore wisdom. Verse 1 tells us these are the Proverbs of Solomon, compiled later. Verse 2 highlights that God's glory is in concealing matters. In verse 3, we learn that heaven is high and the earth is deep. Verse 4 emphasizes the importance of removing dross from silver. Verse 5 reminds us to remove the wicked from the king's presence. Verse 6 advises against self-promotion in the presence of rulers. Verse 7 teaches us that it's better to be invited than to intrude. In verse 8, we learn about the dangers of rushing into disputes. Verse 9 encourages us to settle disputes with a friend privately. Verse 10 warns against gossiping, as it can lead to betrayal. In verse 11, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold. Verse 12 describes wise correction as a golden earring. Verse 13 compares a faithful messenger to refreshing snow. Verse 14 warns about false gifts that lead to disappointment. In verse 15, patience can persuade a ruler. Verse 16 advises moderation in consumption. Verse 17 suggests visiting your neighbor sparingly. Verse 18 warns against false witnesses, which can harm reputations. In verse 19, trust in unfaithful people is like a broken tooth. Verse 20 compares singing to a heavy heart to taking away a coat. Verse 21 teaches us to be kind to our enemies. In verse 22, kindness can lead to unexpected rewards. Verse 23 highlights that a north wind brings rain. Verse 24 encourages us to find solace in solitude. Verse 25 reminds us that good news is like cold water. Verse 26 warns about the dangers of a corrupt leader. Verse 27 advises moderation in seeking sweetness. Finally, verse 28 tells us, not having rule over one's own spirit is like a broken city without walls. Proverbs 25 teaches us timeless lessons on wisdom and relationships.